Hello, my name is Owen Kemp. I'm here with Wyatt McClure and Mia Sanchez. We are the Red Team, and today we will be presenting our application, BSU Budget Pro.
So our application has six basic functions. Number one being logging into an account. The account given as per the instructions for the project. Username will be BSU and password will be Bronco. After this, next main function will be navigating a menu where the program opens up a basic console navigation menu where you select a number which will activate and execute one of the other four functions. Of these is logging transactions. Obviously, if for a budgeting app, you need to be able to track when and how you spend money. And then you can input savings goals, which will give you just a very basic overview of how much you want to save and how much you're able to put back per paycheck, and give you a total on how much you can put back over an estimated period of time based on the user input. Following that, there's also the ability to assign categories to your spending. What this will do is assign one of four categories that we chose to be pretty basic, which is housing costs, food, debt costs, and other miscellaneous costs. So for each transaction that you had previously entered, you will give this a category, and then it will give you your appropriate percentage and total spending in that category for whatever period of time you chose to put in your transactions for. And finally, you can create just a basic budget for yourself where you input the amount of money you make in a month and input the preferred amount of spending you want for each category that we have listed in the program, and we'll be able to show you how much you need to put back in each of those categories.
So as far as the use case UML that we created for this project, we had a couple different applications like Wyatt described previously. So to start, we have logging into the application where the user is going to use that predetermined username and password to log into the application. From there, the application is going to validate the user ID followed by validating the password and then letting them log into the application.
Would you like me to describe the input transactions?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So once you enter the menu item for that, it will prompt you to input a date, a location, and an amount for a transaction, and it will save these into a global variable array, which will overall save the transactions to the whole program so that you can reference those from other parts of the menu.
Next, the system will prompt you to input your paycheck amount. And then from there, it will prompt you to input a desired percentage for each of the four categories. And this will be followed by the system outputting what cash equivalent of those percentages you'll be able to have for each category based on the percentages that you inputted. Following this, it will prompt you to input your savings goal per paycheck and the period of time you plan to obtain this or retain this goal. And it will then output how much you can project to save in that period of time.
And the next use case is talking more about the menu. It's pretty straightforward as far as use cases go. It just lets you navigate the menu. So even though it's a substantial part of the code, it's pretty straightforward as to how it's used.
And then lastly was the part about generating categories that are pretty straightforward on what you spent your money on, and then totaling what you spent in each category. So the user would input those transaction amounts previously, and the application would grab those inputs. Then it would allow you to assign those transactions to those specific categories, the four that we listed before. And then from there, it's going to total all of the money that you spent in each of the four categories.
So this is the activity diagram for the main menu. Again, it's pretty straightforward. Once you're accessed into the main menu, the user selects the desired location or class to be executed. It opens that selection, and once you have completed that task or part of that code, it will move you back to the main menu so you can select either another part or exit.
And this is the activity diagram for logging into the application. The user is going to see a login page displayed on the application. It's going to have an option where they can input their username. The application is going to validate the username, and from there it'll have the option, or it'll make sure that you are inputting the password next because your username was validated, or it'll give you a message asking you to try a username again because yours was incorrect. If it was validated after you've input the password and it's verified, it does the same thing, either moving you forward to the application or prompting you again to enter your password because it was incorrect.
So inputting the transaction history, again, a little bit straightforward, but once you're in that part of the program, it will ask you, as I had mentioned earlier, for a date, a location, and a amount of the transaction, and then of course saves these transactions into the program so that they can be referenced later. And within that, there is also a function to display the transactions whenever you need them.
And then from there, we've got the activity diagram for assigning spending categories with the totals. So it's going to import the transactions from that initial inquiry where the application had you input your transactions. From there, it's going to let you assign transactions to a main category. Those 4 categories again being living expenses, food, debt payment, or miscellaneous. After that, it's going to calculate and display the total spent in each of those 4 categories, and then allow you to save those changes and move back to the main menu if you're finished.
So next, as the user, you will be able to input your savings contribution for every paycheck that you have. Now, if you don't put a positive number, since this is a budgeting app, we would like to think that you'll be saving at least $1 of every paycheck. So if you put in a negative number or put in 0, there will be an error message and it will prompt you to save a little bit more and try a little harder. You will also be asked to input the number of months you plan to save, and then you'll receive your outcome of how much money you'll make in that time frame. So next, for creating a budget, once you input your paycheck amount, it will prompt you between the 4 categories of expenses, savings, spending, and your emergency fund. You'll be asked to split this into 4 different percentages. If those 4 percentages do not add up to 100%, you will receive a display error message asking you to make sure that it all adds up. Otherwise, you'll have extra money left over, or you'll be somehow having money that you didn't earn. And then once this is done correctly, it will output the equivalent dollar amount based on the percentages that you inputted.
So for the class diagram, it obviously just lays out the functional parts of how this might be executed. Of course, the classes for my 2 UMLs, even though they are fairly complicated in and of themselves in the program, the classes are pretty straightforward, whereas transaction history is something that the user interacts with to input transactions and save them, and the main menu is something that the program user uses just to navigate in order to access the rest of the programs.
Owen?
So for savings categories, there are 4. It is an inheritance, so all 4 of these are being treated the same way. And then the paycheck is just directly associated with the program user, as the program user earns that and then inputs what they have.
And then as far as categorizing the transactions and then logging in, we've just got logging in as one option, and then we are inheriting the transaction history from the initial transaction inputs when you first get into the application. And then we've got assigning transactions, spending categories, and then we move into display category totals, all from the user.
So this is the sequence diagram for the main menu. Again, hate to repeat myself, but fairly straightforward as far as how the user interacts with it. User inputs a selection into the main menu, and that takes them to the desired class location so that they can execute that part of the program. And then once that is over, it will return them back to the main menu.
And the sequence diagram for the logging in of the application, user would be able to start the program where they can see the login window. It's going to validate the user with their username and password. Once it does that, it'll retrieve their information so that they can see their Budget Pro software. And once they're finished and it displays the user information, they would be able to see what they've already input or have the option to input information.
So this is the sequence diagram for inputting the transaction history. Oh, we forgot to take out a part. There is inputting a transaction where it will ask you again for the amount, the type, and the date of the transaction. Previously, we were thinking about having it read from a comma separated value file, but unfortunately that was something that we were not able to accomplish. But nonetheless, it is here if we were able to execute it, where it would have read the file and saved those transactions into that same arrays, and then once again display the transactions back to the user.
And then the sequence diagram for assigning the spending categories with their totals, we would read the input transactions that we've got in the system. It would show that transaction history, allowing you to load, well, it would load those transactions from the previous inputs. It would pre-generate those four main categories that we had before. So living expenses, debt, miscellaneous, and food. And then it would have you put those transactions into expense categories where it would total the amount spent per category, and it would send that information to BSU Budget Pro. And then it would return those transaction categories with their totals to the user so they can see that information.
So for the savings goals, there's two things that are going on almost simultaneously. First, the user is entering their goals, and then next, the user is entering their paycheck percentage. And as that's happening, the coding system is calculating their savings goals and calculating their paycheck percentage. This is based on the months that was inputted, and then finally it will return the answer back to the user. Similar to the savings goals, when it comes to the budget, the user will be entering their paycheck value. They'll also be entering the associated percentages with each category. While this is happening, the coding system will be calculating the inputs that it received and then eventually returning the desired outcome back to the user.
And that is everything. So that's BSU Budget Pro. We went through all the parts, the UML document with the sequence diagram, activity diagram, and all parts included for that. Anything
Thank
else?
you for listening to our presentation.
The only thing I would have to add is, of course, we had to go through many trials and tests to finally nail down what we were able to create functionally, and hopefully you enjoy what we're able to produce as an end product.
Absolutely. Alrighty.